Welcome to Visionary Voices Exchange podcast. I'm your host, Janet Lebrecht, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here to discuss everything that you thought you knew about blindness. We're available on every major streaming platform, so let's get ready to dive in. Well, we want to start today's program by welcoming Miss Amy Bauer to our program today. Amy, thank you so much for joining us on Visionary Voices Exchange.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here.
Well, I want to just start by also saying to our audience that one of the reasons that I reached out to you and I have crossed paths over the years here because I am a former resident of Massachusetts, and you are an oceanographer with Woods Hole Institution down in Woods Hole. So I wanted to reach out to you because I thought it might be interesting for our audience, number one, to learn about you. What are you doing these days? But also, what makes your role so unique is that you are a person who happens to be blind, who is an oceanographer. And I thought it would be interesting for folks to learn about, number one, what is an oceanographer? Number two, how does it relate to all of the discussion that we hear about today, climate control and being able to understand the impacts of the ocean and why things may be happening, in the ocean and how that relates to us, but more importantly, how an individual who happens to be blind manages the science. And you're a senior scientist, correct?
Yes, I am.
And so let's start with your blindness. What is your eye condition and how did it lead you to this particular career pathway?
I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa when I was in my early 20s. I was, in fact, already a few years into my graduate studies at the University of Rhode Island. And before that, I had some hints, I know now, but I didn't know at the time, of an issue with difficulty adjusting to dark rooms and light and dark adjustment, which now I know is a precursor of retinitis pigmentosa. Mm-hmm. But I did. That's all I had. But then a regular eye exam exposed an unusual blind spot in my vision, which was diagnosed initially as macular degeneration, which it is, but it turns out it's part of a sort of a kaleidoscope of different, two, basically. I had both retinitis pigmentosa and macular degeneration. So that was in my early 20s when I was in grad school.
So did you start noticing visual decline from your central acuity vision, your straight ahead vision, not your peripheral side vision?
That's exactly right. Yeah, except for this kind of annoying issue of the light dark adaptation. Sure. I didn't really notice any problems. What sent me to the optometrist, actually, to just for a routine eye exam, was that I'd gotten in a car accident on the highway, and that it actually, now that I recall, did not send me to the I was just having a routine eye exam when they discovered this small extra blind spot in my macula. So, but then it started to all fit together. I went on to get more diagnoses in Boston. I grew up in Rockport, Massachusetts, so it's about an hour northeast of Boston. But I went into Boston after this blind spot was discovered, and slowly the full diagnosis unfolded with the macular degeneration first, and then eventually a year or two later, the retinitis pigmentosa.
Mm-hmm. And what was that like in terms of looking at your personal life, looking at your career objectives that you had in mind, and here you are then in the midst of getting this diagnosis, which you probably either never heard of or knew anybody else who may have had it?
You're exactly right in that I had never heard of it before. No one in my family had any such diagnosis or symptoms. So I didn't know anyone else. I didn't know personally anyone who was blind or low vision in any way, much less any scientist. And so I was completely devastated initially and scared because I didn't know if I could continue. And I was really into this career track that I was on. I really wanted to be an oceanographer. I found it so interesting and exciting. And I was having the opportunity to go out on research vessels and do research from ships far out at sea. And I just was loving it, loving the life, and so suddenly with this diagnosis, I wasn't sure that it was going to be possible. The diagnosing physician only said that you'll likely lose some or most of your vision over some unknown period of time.
Sure.
And that was not very definitive, yeah. So I was initially quite worried and upset.
So, thinking about your career choice and now knowing about this diagnosis, how did you go about thinking about, well, maybe I can go forward? What was the next step for you that helped you to get into this career pathway, but utilizing different strategies to be able to make it a successful career choice?
I was very fortunate to be referred to a low vision specialist in Boston. His name is Jerry Friedman, and
know him well.
Yeah, he really was a key person in my life at that time in terms of his can-do attitude. We can solve anything,
Yes.
pretty much. He was super excited. I was an oceanographer. He was a sailor, and so he understood the lure of the sea very well. And he just was so optimistic and positive that there were solutions out there in already available and would be more in the future. So that gave me a lot of hope and really made a huge difference at that time. He introduced me first to some special glasses, these, I forget what they call, not bifocals, I can't remember, bioptic lenses that would help move the images I needed to look at away from the blind spot area, so that I could still see them. And then it advanced from there, but he introduced me to the video magnifier, which was a hugely important tool for me for many years. So I really attribute my ability to get through that initial uncertainty to him.
Well, Jerry was always one of the doctors that always, looked at things from an optimistic perspective. He was always encouraging and always, even if he didn't have the solution, he promoted that concept of hope, just as you said, and so it made you feel as though, okay, so I'm not going crazy here. It's not a death sentence, and there are many different ways to deal with these kinds of progressive conditions that all of us encounter, and so I think that really makes a huge difference, especially early on into the diagnosis.
Yes, it did for me. Yeah, definitely, for sure. And part of that, sort of hand in hand, was coming to terms with the fact that the vision was going to change slowly at a rate that could not be predicted, and that I have a tendency to project into the future too far sometimes and get overly concerned about something that's a bit far in the distant time and that I have no control over anyway. And so I tried really hard to keep telling myself to take one day at a time. And I think that was also key, because if I had sort of just collapsed into the idea like, oh my God, I'm going blind. Oh no, it's over. My life is over. My dreams are dashed. that could really take the wind out of one's sails.
Yes.
But I try to avoid that kind of thinking and say, well, okay, this is what I can do today. Let's do it, and see what happens as time goes by. Maybe I will get to a point where it is truly impossible to continue, but we're not there yet. So let's just take it one step at a time.
Absolutely. And so, thinking about what an oceanographer does, walk us through exactly what an oceanographer is and where do you do it? We know that obviously it's in the ocean, but you're a senior scientist and you are obviously a scientist. So, what does an oceanographer do for our listeners?
Well, oceanography is a super exciting science, and it's more broad than many people realize. When you say oceanographer, the general person on the sidewalk might just think of the most, we call them charismatic megafauna, which are the biggest and most photographed animals that live in the ocean, whales and sharks. Dolphins, definitely dolphins, yes. But in fact, oceanography is a very, very broad science that includes not just the marine life that lives in the ocean, but even the chemistry of the seawater, which is very complicated. Also, the geology and the sediments along the coastline. There's also a whole field of ocean engineering where scientists and engineers work to make equipment that can survive in the ocean. My particular specialty is called physical oceanography, and it's sort of combining the words physics and oceans, because that particular subfield is focused on the physical forces that make the ocean water move. That's essentially what a physical oceanographer does, is try to figure out what are those forces that make the water move the way it does. Well, even before that, how is the water moving? we have to observe that first, then try to figure out why is it doing that? Why is it doing that now? And what is it going to do in the future? Mm-hmm. So I have spent my whole career doing those two things, figuring out how to measure the ocean currents, and then how to figure out how to understand what forces are causing that ocean movement.
Sure. Well, and if you're studying the current and what makes it move and how does it actually happen, are you also looking at some of the things that we don't necessarily think about as a general public every day? I always think about things like what is going into our oceans and how is that affecting? What's the impact on the coral reefs? And why do we assume because there is a coral reef that whatever we're doing to the ocean or whatever goes into the ocean for our sea life, when you think about what the sea life that's in the ocean, and some of which I don't think there are probably species that we've never discovered.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so, do you actually get to study some of the impacts of the environmental decisions that are being made about what goes into the ocean and how that impacts it?
Indirectly, yes, is the answer to your question, in that I am trying to make sure we have very good descriptions of how motion works in the ocean. So when those plastics do get dumped into the ocean, or there's an oil spill, or any other pollutant, that we will be able to predict where those contaminants are going to move. So indirectly, yes, I'm trying to make sure we have the base knowledge to understand how everything we put in the ocean is going to spread out. And that includes coral reefs. I tend to work mostly in the very deep ocean, and coral reefs are mostly in the shallow zones around the coastlines. So I don't do a lot of coastal oceanography, but nonetheless, the oceans do carry nutrients, larvae, everything that a coral reef needs to survive and thrive, is carried by ocean currents. So again, indirectly, we need to know where those ocean currents are and how they're going to change in the future, and how will that impact the coral reef health.
Well, and when you think about some of the climate change that we're experiencing also, I imagine that is something that, has to be taken into consideration. Also, how these weather changes, the rainfall, the lack of rainfall. I keep reading these stories lately about some of our largest lake water supplies that are diminishing.
Yes,
at record
drought.
levels. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when you think of, we always think the ocean is a lot of water. And
limitless.
yeah, but it is not limitless.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's always interesting. So do you get to look at those kinds of issues also, the climate control, how the impact of it?
Yes, definitely. Even more so than the processes going around the coast. My work is very relevant to the ocean's role in the Earth's climate system. Many people don't realize how important the oceans are in the climate system. You usually think of what we on land experience every day, the weather, and maybe the climate, which is how weather patterns shift over long periods of time. But the oceans are just a critical player. They are a very large source of water, and without the salt, they are by far the largest source of fresh water, once you remove the salt. And so the whole hydrological cycle for the whole planet is controlled mostly by the oceans, not what goes on in land. So all these droughts and downpours and changes in the precipitation patterns are heavily connected to the oceans. Also, another one that's very close to home in the eastern U.S. anyway, especially the East Coast, is hurricane development and intensification is very sensitive to the temperature of the seawater. Hurricanes are ocean storms. They can go over land, but they cannot sustain themselves for very long once they go over land because the energy source is the warm water of the oceans. So tracking, which currents carry warm water into hurricane development zones is really important. Also, just monitoring the temperature of the oceans everywhere, Gulf of Mexico and off the East Coast of the U.S., in the Caribbean, is a big part of what my field does, and I do to some extent as well, myself. And the oceans also have absorbed a huge amount of carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide that we have put into the atmosphere through burning of fossil fuels, much of it is in the atmosphere, but most of it has been absorbed by the oceans. Thank goodness, because if it had not, we'd be in a much hotter place now than we are. But the ocean's ability to absorb all this extra carbon dioxide is limited. And we're trying to understand what are those limits and when will we reach them. And then the ocean won't be able to absorb any more, and then we'll be in a bad spot.
Yeah, then we're in trouble.
Yeah, right.
So as an oceanographer, what kinds of assistive technology and what role does that assistive technology play in you being able to continue performing your duties?
That has changed over the years as my vision has changed. As I mentioned earlier, at the beginning, I could use these special glasses to move images away from my blind spot into a healthier part of the retina, and that worked pretty well. But as my vision declined, I found I needed larger print of everything. So I used a video magnifier, which allows you to increase the text size of printed text, as well as you can magnify graphics. And graphics and data displays are obviously an important part of my work, my research. I also figured out how to use magnification on the computer screen. In some ways, I'm a bit lucky in that my work does not require lab work, like at a lab bench or microscope work. Now, there are blind and low vision scientists who are in those fields that require lab work, and they found their own adaptations and accommodations and adaptive technologies for that. I'm not in that category, though. Most of the research I do is on the computer. When I'm not at sea, most of it is on the computer, and so the access to the computer is the most important thing. So I used magnification on the computer for a while until that wasn't efficient anymore. And then I switched over to screen reader. Mm-hmm. And I'm a very, very a very active screen reader user, every day, all day, both for my work and my personal life. But as you do as well, I'm sure, use a screen reader for everything. I mean, yes, email, reading and writing email, all my communications, web, internet searching, all my writing, my professional papers, reading other people's professional papers, and even writing computer code to crunch the numbers, as we say, of the data that we're collecting. The screen reader is the key adaptive technology for me. And that goes over onto the smartphone as well. I use an iPhone with VoiceOver. For my computer, I use Windows with JAWS primarily.
Yeah.
And so that has been a, incredible tool for maintaining the ability to do research mostly independently.
Well, I have read your background, and I know that you have received numerous awards for your research. So congratulations on
Thank
that. You have authored numerous articles, with other scientists, and we are so grateful to have that opportunity, but also just to know that individuals in the blindness community, and for those who are just joining the blindness community, that they think about, their career pathways, and that they don't make decisions so quickly about their inability to pursue, their dreams, just as you said earlier, that today is so different. I'm of that age where we didn't have any of this technology, and I mean any of it.
Right.
Yeah. And so, maybe my own career decisions could have been different.
Yeah.
Had that technology been available back then, but it wasn't. So, but we also find ways to adapt and to modify what we need, to be able to do what we do. And so I think that it's just absolutely incredible. What advice would you give to young people today who do have the advantage of the technology as solutions in terms of thinking about the field of science in itself? Because we don't have a large number of people who are blind or low vision in this particular field.
No, that's very true. I like to, when I speak to public audiences or members of the blindness community, whether they're students or parents, I like to really try to reach out to the parents of young people, because they, especially if they have a child who has low vision or blindness, this may be their first exposure to that community, and they may not have the latest information about the technology that is available and all the options and possibilities that are available. And their young student is really looking to them for advice and support. And so I like to encourage parents to really dig in and educate themselves and not make assumptions based on what's probably relatively limited information about what's available, because their child will be so influenced by their own willingness to research and learn what the options are. So I always like to reach out to the parents, and because I've heard, unfortunately, some stories from young adults, whose parents were not supportive and felt hopeless about the situation for their child, and there's so much now available. There's all good reasons to be hopeful. And so for the young people themselves, usually the first, one of the concrete pieces of advice I give is to develop excellent computer skills as a blind or low vision user.
Yes.
Keyboard skills, knowing your keyboard without having to see it, and becoming familiar with magnification or screen reader software, and just go crazy on learning about computers. It doesn't mean you have to be a fancy computer programmer, but just learning all the basic like Microsoft products, Microsoft Word, certainly email. Although I find out young people don't use email very often. They're texting all the time or other things. But anyway,
Don't
emails.
answer their phone either.
Right. Emails are important, though, because that's how the professional world still communicates largely, I think, is an email. Excel, perhaps, simple basic spreadsheets, you know, because the pathways to employment, once you have those computer skills, are much more plentiful, whether it's science or anything. It's such, with the screen reader now and magnification, it's so much more accessible than, of course, it was 20 or more years ago. So I feel like that's like a key skill for youth to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think there isn't, with the exception of some very physically related type jobs that are out there today where you don't have to use a computer. So when you don't have those skills today, it puts you in a whole different category of what will be considered, someone who is qualified even for a position, because all those skill sets are assumed, and employers are not typically willing to negotiate on those. Those are where really, if you can't do it, you can't do it, and it's not something you can fake. You really have to have those skills. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And my second piece of advice usually is to reach out and find other either young people or older, more experienced people to be mentors, because it can be a very isolating experience to especially, to be born blind or to lose your vision at any age, really, because you might find yourself the only one you know.
Yes.
Right. And you don't know what to do. You don't know where to start. Like, what? I have no idea. And some ophthalmologists are more helpful than others. But connecting with a low vision specialist, but also finding others with lived experience can be very just life-saving, really.
Yes.
And I will point to one organization for potential scientists called the Academy of Blind Scientists. And that's the website, academyofblindscientists.org. Is an organization started by Mona Mankara, who's a professor at Northeastern University in bioengineering, I think. And she is gathering together people such as herself and myself who are open and willing to be a resource for budding scientists who happen to be blind or low vision, and help them find their way as efficiently as possible.
That is so important, because, individuals that don't have a disability are always looking, to others for resources and information or mentoring opportunities. And I think that that's what really truly makes the difference for people, particularly for people who are young and who have a disability, regardless of what the disability may be, is that you need to see others who look like you, who you need to see others who have had the same issue and help navigate, you through those kinds of adjustments and that inspiration. But also that's what helps build resiliency for people with disabilities and being able to see yourself beyond the disability, because a disability shouldn't define you as an individual.
Right.
It's a condition, it's an opportunistic condition that can happen to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And people like yourselves and Mona and others who are out here and who've kind of been there and walked that walk really can provide a source of support and guidance that's critical to people seeing themselves in their own future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something that I feel is very important for me to be available, because I've learned so much over the decades, about how to navigate a career in science as a first low vision, now blind person, that I don't want myself to just retire and disappear,
Yes.
and not share that. That I get asked to do a lot of different things, and some of them I turn down, and some of them I don't. The one I never turn down is any cold call or email from a student or a young person, or any age really, who is looking for advice.
Yeah.
I just always say yes. I really appreciate the opportunity to do what I can to help others with their challenges.
Well, that is absolutely amazing. And it is so much, more needed in terms of, I wish more people reached back, to the community. I have that same mindset also, that I love to reach
That's
back
clear.
and work with people and give them advice, or at least help with connecting people to resources. And, even if they don't always take it, the information has been imprinted and they may not be able to use it in the immediate moment, but somewhere down that road, I guarantee you, that people remember, where did I get that advice? Oh, this is what they meant. Or, oh, having that connection really helped me to make my next steps. And I've had people in my own personal life that helped me as well. And none of us get to where we are without the help of somebody else. So I really admire the work that you do. You have contributed so much to not only to the field of science, but just to the disability community and the blindness community specifically. So I want to thank you so much for joining us and for sharing the information, but also just for being an incredible person and a visionary.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Amy, and best of luck to you.
Thank you as well. Take care.